You are all set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, James. We'll call the Town Hall Renovation Project Building Committee to order. Mr. Barron, would you take the roll call, please?
Yes, I will. Members are asked to signify their participation when their name is called. Councilor Bedrejko. Councilor Minor.
Here.
Mr. Claffey.
Here.
Mr. Mortensen.
Here.
Mr. Murtha.
Here.
Mr. Woods.
Here.
Mr. Harpy.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. I'll entertain a motion for approval of prior meeting minutes.
Make a motion that we accept the minutes from the prior meeting. Ed Martha.
Second.
Second.
Any
Don Wood.
discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it.
And just a point of order, I'm here, Jeff.
Hi,
Okay.
Gail.
Hi.
Public participation. James, do we have anybody?
No attendees at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Project update, Frank, down.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. Okay, we'll jump right into the agenda, starting with the financials. Again, going back to the last committee meeting, last batch of approved changes brings the total value of the change orders to $958,486.39, which would adjust our GMP accordingly by that amount to $28,719,475.39. Between pending and approximate changes that we're going to dive into shortly, and we'll go into the breakdown, between the pending and approximate is a net add of $47,476.41, which would bring our total anticipated final GMP value to $28,766,950.80. Taking a look at the CM contingency, we'll start there. We started with $831,809 from the last committee meeting. With the approvals we had, brought our approved CM contingency request to $637,621.85. We have right now in the queue, as far as pending requests, totaling $194,187.15, leaving zero within the contingency. And we'll dive into that shortly. I obviously have some changes to go through to explain how we got to zero. And James, if you could just scroll down. Okay, within the owner's contingency, from the last committee meeting, we adjusted, we're up to $820,928.31 committed against the owner's contingency. We have approximate costs. We have pending. We have the pending changes against the owner's contingency, $33,816.41. The approximate value, $13,660, and that would leave zero within the owner's contingency. There's a day two work activity list. It's also part of this agenda that we'll get to towards the end, that we'll dive into. That work is excluded from that calculation above. The owner's soft cost has remained unchanged since we started going through these meetings. I haven't done anything with that. It is part of the overall budget in the total calculation. The CIP funds, we are showing an adjustment there. You'll notice funding available. We have adjusted that by $150,000. So the total funding available would be the $150,000. That is a amount that we are anticipating from the town of Newington. And again, once we get through the COPs, hopefully I'll give you some better insight into how all these numbers kind of flush out. So again, calculating the amounts above with our GMP and the soft costs, excluding CIP funds, the total project budget is $30,473,761.80. And if I could just dive into the schedule and get that out of the way, Joe, is that all right?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, so the overview on the schedule, really specific to phase 2 activities. That's really what we're down to over the next, basically over the next month. Just to give you an overview of the schedule, we do plan to be here into January for at least the first few weeks of January, and then returning in the spring to do the bituminous work. The timing of it just doesn't work out, and the concern regarding the temperature, we can't dispute that. We certainly don't want to compromise warranty on the parking lot. So we would return in the spring to complete the parking lot work and any of the plantings that are owed as part of phase 2. So let's just dive into the work completed since the last time we met. The masonry reinforcement around the perimeter of the PD, so that work is complete. We have the footing drain work done across the parking lot. The new sanitary line, so that's been installed and connected. We have some level of storm piping completed, more towards the north side, closer to the PD. We still have a run of storm piping to do further south where the new parking lot is going. Now that we have the storm basically connected, that enabled us to disconnect the overflow drains that were set up along the east side of the new town hall. If you guys ever walked up there towards the town hall building, the big piping that came off the gym, that was a temporary setup that we had that has since gone away. So that sidewalk should be fully accessible at this point. Let's see, the soil removal. So that is something new and that's been recently completed. We have it currently stockpiled on site, and that's where a significant amount of cost is concentrated right now in the budget. And the reason for exhausting our resources to cover costs to deal with the amount of contaminated soil that has come out of the ground. Roughly speaking, about 800 yards have come out of the ground. I have a couple photos to show you what that looks like, just to give you an idea of the magnitude of what we're dealing with. Unfortunately, it's fuel contaminated soil, so the unit cost to deal with that is much higher than, let's just say, a typical polluted soil would be. We'll drill down on that shortly when we get into the cost section of the agenda. In terms of other work in progress, we've got the underground utilities, so that's in place now for the generator. We just had that trench inspected and signed off by the materials testing agency, including the local building inspector. And I believe we have a site crew that was working on backfill earlier this afternoon. The storm drain piping, I mentioned, we still have a run to do closer to Garfield Street. The footings for this, the new stair that's going to run adjacent to the PD on the south side. So that form work and prep for placement of concrete, that work is happening now. I've got I think I have one photo to show you of that work in progress. The underground utilities, that's also a work in progress for the new site lights. We're down to probably a handful of items as it relates to the owner's punch list. I believe we recently received a list of items to address in the gymnasium that I know we're sort of working on in conjunction with completing phase 2. And then as far as approved change orders are concerned, we do have a number of lock sets that the town had asked we replace, remove and replace, so that we have a key override function. And I believe our superintendent is planning to schedule that work starting next week. We were waiting for the carpenter that was here that did a lot of the hardware that's familiar with the building, and he's going to be available next week to get into that and get that done. We've got some miscellaneous camera relocations. It was part of a previously approved change order. That is on tap for next week. And then some miscellaneous power requirements for NCTV. All right, so work on the horizon. Again, like I said before, we do plan to be here for most of January. So we do want to get as pretty much close to done as we can, leaving pretty much a finished subgrade to receive the bituminous, and then wrapping up the skin around the exterior skin around the PD. So as I mentioned before, we're in the midst of putting in the concrete, and we'll continue to follow the course of construction to put back the skin around the PD. That would be the steel reinforcement and the AVB, the sheathing, framing, sheathing, AVB, and masonry to finish off the south and east side of the police department. Jim, if you could just scroll down there.
Excuse me,
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
Other critical milestones,
Excuse me.
obviously finishing up what we have in front of us, into January. We are continuing to work Saturdays to try to minimize that impact. We don't want to extend being here into February. So we have been working Saturdays, and we'll continue to do that. And then there is a day 2 list. As I mentioned before, we're dealing with a significant amount of fuel contaminated soil that has been extracted from the ground along the PD based on direction we received from Enviromed, the environmental hygienist hired by the town. We followed their direction on how much material to remove. In order to cover that cost, we've had to essentially take some things out of the budget that we were previously discussing. And just to give you one example would be the irrigation system. So that was in the budget. It was roughly a $30,000 to $35,000 price tag to entertain doing that work. We've since taken the irrigation system out to cover the cost of dealing with the soil.
Frank,
yeah,
I think Ed Murther had a question. Mr. Murther?
Yeah, Tom, could you tell me, how do we get to this point where we have the contaminated soil? Where did it come from? How come it wasn't detected earlier until the 11th hour?
Well, it was under the old town hall. So we actually, so to take a step back and answer the first part of your question, there was an old oil tank that sat on a pad underground, and during excavation for the first phase of the project, we did come across the pad. The tank was gone, but there was the pad intact, and you could see the straps from the tank. And we did have to deal with fuel contaminated soil at that point in time. And when we had discussed removing that material with the environmental hygienist, they had recommended providing an encapsulant. And at that point, we didn't believe we had any more fuel contaminated soil to deal with, maybe to some extent. But we didn't have, we don't have X-ray vision. We can't see what's going on underneath the old town hall at that time. So when we, obviously getting to this point, we uncovered another pocket and just did not expect the magnitude that we're dealing with right now. Unfortunately, Enviromed, as much as we like to leave the material, they have a directive from DEEP that basically says the material has to be removed from the site and disposed of properly. So that's where we're at right now.
Was it encapsulated?
Well, we encapsulated what we removed and created a barrier. There was no way to excavate any further because of the existing building being in the way. We couldn't dig underneath the building at that point in time.
So at that time, there was probably even a potential that it was even more under there then, correct?
Yeah, but we did not anticipate this magnitude. I mean, I don't think anybody could reasonably expect that much material being contaminated.
Was the encapsulation done right? Or should it more been added to it or whatever? I'm
No.
having trouble wrapping myself around this one.
I mean, we've already gone through this whole process. I had presented that change, way back when we were digging for the foundation for the basement, is when this whole thing came up. And yes, we did it correctly. We did it based on the directive we got from Enviromed. They were the ones that inspected it and gave a sign off.
So they signed off, and now we have another problem.
Yes.
Deeper.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, now the backfill that's going in there, that's like 40 loads coming out? 800
Yeah,
yards,
it was-
about 40 yards, 40 truckloads?
Yeah, the structural fill, the infill of that hole is already done. Yeah, and to answer your question, it was roughly 40 truckloads.
All right, now the structural fill that was put back in there, I mean, the town has plenty of structural fill. If somebody had asked us, we could have provided that structural fill and saved a few bucks there, instead of eliminating irrigation and things that we were hoping for.
Okay, I wish I knew that sooner. No one had mentioned that, to us. We've run into this situation before. We've never tried to go through services, through the town. We've always used contractors on site for other contractual reasons.
All you got to do is ask.
Okay, Frank, let's move on, please.
Okay. All right. So the COPs for review and approval, I don't have much this evening, just 4 COPs. The first one, 330, that's to handle the reinforcement at the dispatch. Once we got into the demo, we discovered an existing steel beam that was cantilevered. So there's some cost to shore that steel. The cost of the new steel, obviously the excavation and placement of a new footing and concrete pier to support the steel, and then the masonry around it. So the total cost of that change is $28,480.47. 341 is to put in 4 duplex receptacles for NCTV for their data racks. $1,382.19 is the value of COP 341. And 344, we, by contract, had to put in new roof trains over the PD roofing system and tie into existing rain leaders. However, the rain leaders are only 2 inches in diameter. They need to be 3 inches So this is to replace the piping that connects to the new roof drains for $3,953.75. And the last one, excuse me, the last one, 352, is operator time from the elevator car company. And that is to make some camera adjustments. Unfortunately, they've got to come back, and they pretty much have you locked into a certain number of hours. But we are taking that out of CM contingency, so there's no increase to the GMP. So with those four COPs, the total value is $33,816.41.
Frank, are we confident on change order 330 that aren't any other surprises in that building? I know we had to do the retaining wall work and then this on top of it. Is there anything else that your people have seen that's going to be a?
I mean, Joe, at this point, no, we've stripped the entire perimeter of that PD. So as far as the PD is concerned, we've uncovered everything there along its exterior. So we're at a point now, we're just putting it back together.
Now, the council, when it broke out some of the costs associated with this project, before we started building, I believe budgeted 500 and some odd $1,000 for the renovation of the PD. And is that money distinguished into this facility, or is it broken out on the site as a whole, or how did you handle that part of the budget? Do you recall?
Yeah, I mean, when we worked with every subcontractor that had work at the PD, they have values broken out in their contract to address the PD. So if I were to go back and take, all those values from the sub trades, I would get to that $500,000 mark that was part of the original GMP value. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so I think we had $132 a square foot or something on the 3,900 square feet of that building. But the other issue I'm concerned about is we haven't resolved the steam heat system. Is that correct? Is that still a question for the engineering firm?
Yes, that's correct.
Would you just kind of quickly give the committee a review on that?
Yeah, so when we got into demo at the PD, I believe we had some old piping that was fed from some old boilers in the existing building. So with the existing building going away and the boilers going away, that in turn eliminated a portion of heat to the PD, specific to basically the back of that, dispatch area, the older structure on the back side of dispatch. There is a portion of that PD that doesn't have heat. So obviously we want to put something back. We don't have the boilers, obviously, that has, gone away. And I mean, there's a number of things we could do there. We could put electric baseboard heaters back in those spaces. I suppose that could be one option. But we have reached out to the design team for their input on it.
Frank,
Chris, do you have some input on that, Chris O'Neill?
Yeah, we did receive a design for an electric unit heater for that space. So Downs has that information. They just need to price it up with their subcontractors to get the magnitude of cost. But they do have the answer to that question from DTC for the heater.
And would you be able to give us an estimate, Frank, as to what that's going to cost the project?
I sure can.
Okay.
I haven't caught up to that paperwork, obviously, but I will look at that with our
That was
folks.
an unanticipated development, correct?
Correct.
It's not clear to the committee how that would get designed that way since, or not picked up in the design work by the engineering firm since the boilers, the whole system was dependent on the boilers. And they knew we were knocking down the building and the boilers weren't going to exist anymore. I'm kind of mystified by that one in terms of, anyway, are there any other questions of Frank on 330?
Commissioner Claffey, then Minor, and then Deputy Mayor.
I'm sorry?
Commissioner Claffey, then Councilor Minor, and then Deputy Mayor Badruco.
Go ahead, Anthony.
It kind of goes with the future COPDs, but we're talking about missed heat. That's its own, ball of wax that we need to deal with. But on the building, now the police department side of the building, has there been any, I haven't seen any, now I may have missed it in an email transaction, so correct me if I'm wrong, but have we done anything with what the new walls as per se are going to look like for the PD? Any, costs associated with, architectural drawings of what it's going to look like? I don't think we've ever talked about it.
You're talking about the skin, right?
Yeah, the skin of the building. And then I know there's some things going to be done. I read about the sidewalks and changes there, but like we're trying to, mitigate how much open checkbook we have here. So
Right.
where are we at with,
We
this
haven't
lady,
got, you are correct, Anthony. We haven't gotten into specific discussion. We do have some general comments from Downs that I guess it would be the same brick veneer. Is that correct, Frank, to answer Anthony's question?
Yeah, more or less, Joe. We're continuing the look of the existing PD along the face of the dispatch. We're basically carrying that same look along the side.
I guess I want to get more dial it down for the next meeting of, are there anything that we haven't thought of in regards, I guess I'll go all in now on this building that we haven't thought of, that's going to become a $30,000 change order that should have been included with when we did either design or value engineering, et cetera. And just to get it all out there, getting another change order. I knew we had to reinforce when we pulled the building apart. I get that, but this checkbook's getting, I know that, we can't see what's under the soil at times, but these numbers should be getting smaller. And I don't know who's at charge of reviewing that. Frank, Downs, Mark, whomever, I don't like seeing another $28,000 change order. I mean, I know what the building's going to look like, but none of us have seen it or heard of it or talked about it. So that's really where my head's trying to wrap around it now. And I know that doesn't specific to the 4 COPs that are out there that we get a vote on, but it kind of does wrap into.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anthony. And Frank, perhaps you could take that advisement, Anthony's comments.
Yeah, I mean, again, we are at a point now, like I said before, where, we've got through the demo. We've uncovered the surprises along the perimeter of the building.
Okay.
We are at a point now where we're just, putting Humpty Dumpty back together again, right?
I agree.
So, we're placing concrete this week. We will continue with the rest of the construction for that new wall assembly around the south and east side of the PD.
Okay.
We haven't talked about any of the approximate COPs yet, but I believe we have 1 or 2 in there where we do have to address a couple openings that we have to infill, some existing openings. But we are addressing that through the CM contingency to not, to ensure that we're not incurring more cost to the GMP value.
Are there any other, I'm sorry, Mr. Minor. Done, Anthony? You good?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Minor, please.
Thanks, Joe. I'm just not sure if this should be Frank or Chris. In regards to the heat on the old section of the PD, that is for the dispatch area, the stairwell, the server room, and the vacant two rooms up on the second/third floor. Am I correct? That whole area has no heat or environmental controls at all?
It's just the back stairwell there, and I think the vestibule to the stairwell. The remainder of that area, I believe, still has heat there. It was somehow tied into the new police department, but the only remaining portion was the old steam heaters that were fed from the new police department.
Okay, so it's just the stairwell and just the vacant storage on the second/third floor that's empty,
Right.
Correct.
but the server room as well as the old dispatch area, those two do have current environmental controls in them.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Gail, please.
And just to follow up on the heating question, you said that a possible solution is an electric heating capacity. Just curious, what does the existing police department have? What kind of heating?
The upper area, the storage areas, I believe, are all electric heaters. I'm not sure what they have down on dispatch or the other spaces on the first floor. And we went through this issue that they were all electric unit cabinet heaters.
Okay, so it's we are using electric in some areas of the building already, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gail. Okay, I'll entertain a motion if there are any further questions to approve the change orders as presented by Frank totaling $33,816.41. Mr. Mortensen.
I move that we approve COP 330, 341, 344, and 352 for the $33,816.41.
And is there a seconder?
Second. Don Woods.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Woods. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nay, nay.
Nay, Mr. Anthony, one nay.
Two.
Two. Who's the second one? Mr. Murtha. Mr. Barron,
Yes,
would you take a roll call on this motion?
certainly. Those, please signify, those who are in favor or opposed to the motion. Councilor Badraco,
In favor?
Councilor Minor,
In favor.
Mr. Claffey,
Nay.
Mr. Mortensen,
In favor?
Mr. Murtha,
Nay.
Mr. Woods,
In favor.
Mr. Harpy.
In favor?
The motion passes by a vote of 5-2.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Barron, do you need a motion to consider take action on fund transfers?
Yes, please. And again, we're looking for the committee to transfer $33,816.41 from the contingency account to the construction account, which is 9912 to 9911.
Mr. Minor, would you please make that motion?
Make the motion to approve the fund transfer from 9912 to 9911 to cover the construction change orders.
Is there a second?
Second, Rod Mortensen.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any nays?
Nay.
Okay, any other nays? Would you take a roll call, please, Mr. Barron?
Yes, again, members are asked to signify their, whether they're in favor or opposed to the motion. Councilor Badraco,
Aye.
Councilor Minor,
Aye.
Mr. Claffey,
Nay.
Mr. Mortensen,
In favor?
Mr. Murtha,
Favor.
Mr. Woods,
In favor.
Mr. Harpy,
In favor.
Motion passes by a vote of 6-1.
Okay, Frank, would you continue with your presentation, please?
I sure can. All right, so we'll move on to the orders of magnitude section. Got some COPs here to go through with y'all. Some of them may be familiar to you because we've been talking about them for at least the past few meetings. The flagpoles being the first one, COP 266. We've taken another look at this COP. We've gone a couple rounds on this, evaluating the bracket, coming up with a design, looking at it again. Obviously, we don't want to void a warranty on the flagpole itself. Through that first round of design, we realized that we could possibly compromise the warranty by having to notch the flagpole to basically fit onto the new bracket. So there's been some rework going on behind the scenes, and I believe we're close on finalizing the value of this change. Right now, it's hovering around 10,000. The allowances are still in play, giving those portion of those allowances back related to the temporary toilets and the dumpsters. That would be COP 307, 308. And then we have another credit coming back to the town to reconcile the balance of a few trades that are left. COP 327, 339, with the reinforcement, additional reinforcement that we're going through now. We got through some of it. We still have the steel, obviously, to do, and the soil. We are dealing with some winter conditions at this point, and we have earmarked some funds out of CM contingency to account for that, including the general conditions time to go into January. And to come back, we're thinking for a couple weeks in April to do the parking lot and plantings. That's out of contingency. 342, there's a little bit of clean out work that's pretty minor in nature to adjust one of the clean outs inside the Parks and Rec administration. That's a CM contingency item. The modular retaining wall, I believe, I'm showing it there, but I believe we have adjusted that and moved that. We're going to move that off the list completely. I think we can save some funds there by taking that out to adjust our contingency accordingly to cover the cost of the polluted soil. 346, so now we get to the polluted soil and the costs associated with dealing with that. To clarify this one particular item, the $55,762.85, so that is a portion of the cost to deal with that issue. Some of the cost to cover that work is coming out of the CM contingency. So whatever is available out of the CM contingency is coming out, and then a portion of owner's contingency. Roughly speaking, to give you some rough numbers, roughly 72,000 is to deal with the contaminated soil. That's the 800 yards of material and trucking to a facility in Chicopee, Massachusetts. And then roughly 55,000 is to deal with the 40 or so trucks bringing in structural fill. The, let's see, excess clean soil. There is a surplus of clean soil that has to be removed. That's a contingency item we have provisions for. The premium time, I mentioned working the weekends to button up as much as we can because we don't want to bleed the schedule into February and incur more GCs. So we are working a number of Saturdays to wrap this up. So So there's some premium time there for the site subcontractor charged against our CM contingency. And then I mentioned a couple infills along the PD. That was the last piece in terms of, uncovering the old work and making adjustments to the old construction. So we got a couple infills there to do along the exterior of the PD. Again, another contingency item. And then we'll get to a point where we reconcile all of the contract values, and we will have to make adjustments to contracts that carried bond. That is a typical process that we go through at the end of the job. And we've earmarked some money for it in the budget right now, about $8,500. So that totals $13,660. Obviously, there's a few credits you can see there that brings that total value way down. Any questions on that?
Any questions of these? Frank, I had on the flagpole, which has been, I don't know, it's been a story by itself, I guess. To go to Anthony's point, can we see a current shop drawing on how that's going to look? Or can the committee get a sense, because there's been such a variance on how this thing's going to be mounted, and looks, I kind of lost track of it. And now we're up to over $10,000 for the installation. I don't know where we started with the installation cost, but we're over 10,000 now.
Yeah, I mean, some of that cost, Joe, is to basically hire the steel subcontractor to install the flagpole, since he's going back to set the new bracketry for the poles. A while back, we had credited back the original labor that we carried for the flagpole vendor to install them. So we actually credited back a couple grand. I think it was a few months back we did that. But to answer your other question about a rendering or a sketch, Chris, I know we have sketches on the bracket itself. And I know I've seen renderings. I know we have renderings of what the flagpole looks like. It's a 30-foot tapered flagpole that hangs off the face of the west side of the building. There's two of them at that main entry on the west side, facing the police station, and they're at a 5-degree tilt. So I'm sure between Chris and Tom, they can come up with a rendering to show you what the overall look of that is.
Yeah, I think the committee would appreciate it, especially where there's been so many changes, as you well know, to this issue alone. Are there any other questions of these items? These are magnitude of orders which will come in at a later date, but okay, if not, if you'd continue, please, Frank.
Sure. As far as rejected COPs, I have nothing new to report. That list has remained unchanged for the past few meetings at least. But we could scroll down to the next section. Give you an idea of the current work in place, looking at the billing from November through the end of November. We have about 25.5 million in place, less the retainage. So that leaves us roughly 3 million to finish. That would include retainage. If you add those numbers together, that ties out with the financial summary up top to show you where we stand in terms of the overall contract value of the project.
You still feel confident that that 3.1 will get us to the promised land, barring any other real issues?
Well, I mean, as far as the issues, again, I think we've unveiled the issues. The next challenge is going to be looking at this list that I prepared. The next item here, number 3, the day 2 work items for discussion. that some of these we unbolted from the budget. The dry chem system for the data rooms. And again, these.
Just before you get into it, so if we take the retainage out, we're saying that we're pretty comfortable, but we got a couple of million, I guess, after that ballpark, after we pay the trade or give the trade back their retainage. That at this point globally, Downs is comfortable, barring any, when you get into the day two stuff, but at this point, that number will still take us back home to dry dock. I'm just asking, is Downs comfortable that that's the number that's gonna do it? Outside of, making room for things that happen.
Yeah, I mean, as far as unforeseen conditions, I think that's what you're really, asking about. Again, we've got one more run of storm piping to do. As long as we don't uncover anything there, again, that's outside the footprint of the old structure. So it's unlikely that we would, but I can't, I can't rule it out until we get into the ground there.
Okay, go ahead, Frank.
Mr. Chairman,
So
Councilor Minor has his hand raised, as
Mr.
well as
Minor,
Commissioner Claffey.
Mr. Minor?
No, I'll refrain and hold off until he's done with the day two list.
Okay, Mr. Anthony, Mr. Claffey.
Just a question on your day two list, and you can verbally now and then in the future, if it need be, can we separate these items from town hall and police station in the future? I know you have one that's 16 grand for additional lighting, but if we get it deeper and deeper into the finishing of the police station, I don't know how we can better separate them, or in this, say, for the data rooms, is that the dry cleaning for I assume for that price, it's the new town hall, but on like custodial closets, was there one in the police station that got bumped out and they had to add another one, kind of little things like that, just so we can kind of have a bullet point of, hey, that's PD and this is town hall.
Yeah, I mean, well, the way I set it up right now, if it doesn't have PD in the description, then it's for the new town hall.
Perfect.
So,
Okay. Thank you, Frank.
yeah.
Got
Okay, Frank.
Okay.
Anthony, you set?
Yeah, perfect.
And who was next, James? I'm sorry. Do we have another hand up?
No, it was only Councilor Minor and then Mr. Claffey.
Okay. And you're gonna wait till he runs through it, correct, Chris?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Go ahead, Frank.
All right. So again, getting back to this day two list. So it's really, I'll just call it a mixed bag, right? Of various items that we've been discussing, tossing around ideas, some of which did get bolted onto the budget at some point. When we ran into the issue with the soil, obviously being a significant problem, in knowing that we want to get the PD buttoned up, we want to get the parking lot to a point where we can just prep it and come back. We had to take certain things out of the budget. And then some of these things were just kind of came up in conversation, a nice to have, if you will, if you want to call it that. The dry chem system for the data room. So that was the biggest one out of all these, $60,000 price tag to do this. There is a wet pipe system in the data rooms. I guess we could, debate over whether or not that was the right decision. At the end of the day, that's what we were contracted to do, was to provide the wet pipe system. There's a different school of thought that, maybe that should have been a dry chem system. So that's up for discussion. And it's roughly 60 grand based on some of the preliminary numbers and feedback we got from our fire suppression subcontractor. The irrigation system I mentioned, again, that was, brought up. Hey, why don't we have an irrigation system? It wasn't part of the original documents, the construction documents. I don't know if there was an earlier discussion, way back at schematic phase. I wasn't part of those conversations. We have some very preliminary information from an irrigation vendor that got involved. I believe he was actually working with a department from the town. And so we just carved out a rough estimate here, 35 grand to deal with irrigation. And that would be for the town hall. I don't believe this irrigation has any separate zone like over by the PD or where the new parking lot is going alongside the police department. This is more concentrated up at the new town hall. Okay, HVAC and human services, in my opinion, this is probably the most sensitive one out of all of these. If, my opinion, if we had to pick one, I would say human services and getting proper ventilation to the room that houses the massive refrigerators, that gets taken care of. And we've come up with another scenario to help minimize the cost impact of this. We're showing 20, grand here as a rough order of magnitude, but we've got another scheme in mind, basically a mini split system for that room that would work independently to cool that space. And we're working through some numbers now, so I'm hopeful that we'll be well below that 20 grand. I don't think we're talking about saving 10 grand, but at least a few $1,000s, if not a little bit more. The lighting for the PD. So when we talked about the heat for that stairwell, there was also talk about putting back a more permanent light. My understanding is, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a level of lighting in that area. It could serve as a permanent light. I guess that's the real question. If we left what's there now, is it acceptable? Can people live with it? But if they can't, and we got to put something new back, I believe there's some level of rewiring that would be involved that's driving this cost up so high. So we do, again, a rough estimate, not necessarily knowing exactly what we had envisioned there, but coming up with a scheme, roughly 16 grand. The next item, there's a number of signage changes that came about after we got through a final signage package. Those are various things that we need to take a closer look at with the town and find out what exactly is needed. Maybe this can be streamlined. So again, another rough estimate there, about 11 grand. There are some temperature control concerns from the town that we are fielding in conjunction with the design team. We have, balanced the system. The design team is working to, collaborate with us, with our mechanical subcontractor and temperature controls vendor to see what type of adjustments, whether it be to the sequence of operation or some other equipment changes that might need to be made at the units themselves. Although I don't think that needs to happen, but again, we've got a rough estimate here of a couple grand to deal with the temperature control issues. There was mention of adding FRP panels to the custodial closets within the new town hall. In the grand scheme of things, that's small peanuts. About 2,200 is what we estimated. And then the modular retaining wall I had mentioned earlier, we were backing that out to pump up our contingency to cover the cost of the soil. And I'm sure that we can work with the design team on regrading that area. Now, after talking a little bit more with the design team, I understand if we do this, we will end up losing a certain number of parking spaces, and maybe Chris or Tom can chime in as far as the quantity of spaces. But we could essentially pick up, 20 grand, if not more, by not having to do that work. And lastly, there was mention of adding a privacy screen inside the men's room. We did some level of that on the third floor. If you guys recall, there was a change to put in a privacy screen at the Board of Ed level. And now there's a request essentially to do the same thing on the second floor. So we've got an estimate set aside there of $1,500 to cover that work.
Mr. Minor.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I'd like to hear from either Tom or Chris specifically on the retaining wall and the loss of parking spaces, because that's a big deal. With one of the issues that we had was getting the maximum parking available. So if one of them could speak to that.
Chris, are you available?
Yeah, I'm looking at these, the two retaining wall items, and I'm not sure if they're flip-flop, Frank, but I thought we have to do that generator wall in order to put generator where it is. So shouldn't that be flip-flop for the replacing kind wall at the south side of the existing parking lot?
Well, that was another option, looking at the other retaining wall to see, the look into the possibility of eliminating that one as well. But no, this wall is, basically what you're reading there. It is specific to the generator that we thought we could, through grading. Although if we're going to eliminate parking spaces, then maybe it doesn't make sense, and we have to look at something else that can go back into the contingency.
Yeah, I was unaware of any grading.
I'll look at the other wall. I don't know if the value of the other wall, equates to the value of this modular retaining wall. It might, but that's something I'll have to look into.
Right, yeah, I was unaware of that being an option of regrading around the generator specifically. Or impacting parking. So that's new information to me.
What's the timing? I'm sorry, you go ahead, Chris, if you had some more points.
No, I'm all set, Joe, thanks.
Joe, I just had a comment, if I could.
Sure.
And no, at the staff discussion the other day, when we were talking about the soils, there is an opportunity to remove 5 parking spaces from what would be the northwest corner of the parking lot and eliminate a retaining wall and grade down to where the generator is. There is space on the south side of the parking lot where those, in theory, those 5 parking spaces could be relocated, but there is an option, but the number is 5 spots.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. Minor, any other comments on that?
No, I'm trying to wrap my head around locations and loss and trying to figure this out. But if this is still in the discussions phase of day 2 work, I think we'll just hold off until we can get a better handle on it. My biggest concern is that, some of the issues that we've got in here were definitely added in after the fact, outside of the contract scope to begin with. So I think the first thing is, mentally backing those out. With dry chem system, we have a fire protection system in place as it is. Is it what we want? Maybe not. Irrigation system, again, was lost a long time ago. Without having it right now, I don't think is a necessary big discussion to have. The human services issue with that room and the environmental controls or environmental for that room, I think we're a little more of a challenge in terms of importance. The additional lighting for the PD, I'm trying to wrap my arms around that one. Are we referring to stairwell lighting to that specifically? Is that what we're talking about there? Frank, Chris, anybody?
Chris, that's specific to the stairwell.
Okay. All right. And then some of the other issues with the signage, again, these were outside of the construction documents. I don't want to say it shouldn't be considered, but they're outside of the original documents. The other nickel and dime items of FRP in the closet. I mean, some of these issues I think can be handled by, once we completely take occupancy of the building, to be handled as in-house work on some of the smaller items.
Right.
But I'm concerned about, I don't want to lose any parking, period, because that was one of the biggest caveats that we had to this whole thing, was looking for additional parking.
Right.
As it is, we've had losses on the library parking lot phase that I don't want to lose any more.
Okay, thank you. James, I couldn't see who was up next.
Counselor Bedrejko and then Commissioner Claffey.
Gail, please.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Counselor Minor. If these things came in, because in the beginning, we weren't running up against some of these issues, or some of these, came up very unexpectedly, and it did very early on when I first got involved. It seemed like we would have a lot of money left. So yeah, let's do this, let's do that, whatever. But now the reality is hitting us. So I think anything that wasn't part of the initial documents, we really need to look closely at. But I do have a couple questions, and Chris Minor alluded to that dry chem system. Does this $60,000, does that include basically throwing away what we already installed for the wet pipe system?
Frank?
Yeah, essentially in these data rooms, yeah, the dry chem system would replace the wet pipe system for those specific data rooms.
So that $60,000, is that for the new dry chem system, or does that include throwing away what we've already installed?
That's the new dry chem system. Again, we didn't really, push this at all. So we just gave an estimate for the dry chem as just, we didn't think it would go anywhere once we got beyond a certain amount of money. So does it even make sense to investigate it any further?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's what I was just concerned about, because obviously we've already spent a certain amount of money for something that now we're just going to replace. So that's good. The back stairwell lighting, I think earlier in the discussion when you were talking about the heating for the back stairwell, that's an emergency exit basically, so it's not used every day.
Frank?
Chris, I don't believe that's an emergency stairwell, is it?
So I guess it could meet the definition of an emergency egress, but it is an egress stairwell from that second floor space.
Okay, I thought that earlier on you said somebody mentioned that it wasn't used that often. Okay. And then the human services, I guess there's no way that we could get a grant for something like that, right? Because it's not like, I was just wondering whether our human services or whatever could apply for some kind of grant.
Mr. Barron, are you aware of anything in that area?
No, I'm not. Not for a new system that's been installed. I'm not aware of anything that would be available for money. I'm not sure that the opportunity has been explored. The feeling is that the town has paid for a fully operational system and that the room should operate and be fully operational.
Okay.
Gail?
Okay, thank you. That's it. Thanks.
Mr. Claffey, please.
I have three things. One is, Frank, you don't have to allude to it right this moment, but the first thing is we talked about the pad and the modular retaining wall. Do we need to discuss this item a little more because you're trying to get things done in the site work so then you can stop and then come back? I'd hate for us to discuss this and then when you come back to put pavement down in April, we're gonna have to move things because we didn't discuss it enough. And then the other two questions I have on the dry chem system, I'd like to hear from our IT department on what is needed, i.e. can we do with what we have? And then on the signage, I would like to just make sure that we're seeing like, yes, what was put on the plans. I know there's some jurisdictional requirements that they may have needed, not needed, and because between the dry chem, the pad, you're at 60, 70, 80, you're at $91,000. So I'd hate to not talk about the retaining wall as you're trying to wrap up and get ready for the winter, and then have it hurt us more when we open up in spring, because we as a committee haven't got to an agreement quick enough.
Okay, why don't we go in reverse? Paul, are you on the line by any chance?
I am on the line.
Would
So
you
to
respond to that?
yes, on the dry chem, one of the things that we noticed from IT early on when we saw the building designs is we had asked about the protection going into the data rooms. Ideally, you'd want some type of dry chem. You don't want water going in there. If you have water system, then you're looking at having a pre-action system. So that way, if you have a sprinkler head that were to go off on its own, you don't douse that particular room with water. You have to have multiple heat plus smoke or something along that lines. We don't have any of those systems in the new building. So, obtaining this price is for our record, I guess, to try to determine on the initial design why, a dry chem system or a pre-action system wasn't called for as far as from the initial design on this. Again, I don't see us moving forward with it with the cost. At some point, the town may look at trying to determine whether or not we want to go at least with a pre-action system in those rooms, so that we have two things that have to occur before water would go on the electronics in those rooms.
Okay, thank you.
Just for clarification, so when we did the initial design, we're saying we designed it with the wet system and everyone was good? Or did we at the time as a town still have concern and it never got resolved?
Joe, can I comment? Can I comment on this?
Sure. Go ahead, Tom.
So we looked at a number of options when the system was originally designed. There were options for pre-action and dry chemical systems. Those had added cost. In an effort to keep the cost of the project at, a low target, we went with a wet system for the whole building. A wet system for the whole building is code compliant. There's no code requirement for a dry action system. However, Paul is correct. Ideally, if the funds are available, a dry chem system would be the ideal solution for these spaces. It certainly could be retrofitted. They're independent systems. The sprinkler heads that are in those rooms would be capped, and then the dry action system would work independently in those spaces.
I want to get a little better understanding. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, we'll move to Anthony's question on the signage. Frank?
All right, I'll address that one, Joe. There was some signage that was requested by the town in addition to what was originally specified. So that is what is kind of driving that item. Installed on some of those signage to change it or update it to meet what they wanted to have there.
Okay, and then with respect to the last question he had, Frank, can you address that?
Regarding the modular retaining wall?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like just a little bit that I've heard from you all that we want to keep that in play because we don't want to sacrifice any parking spaces. That's what I'm hearing. And so it sounds like the consensus is we need to do everything we can to keep that modular retaining wall in the contract and look for other avenues where we can pick up some funds to offset it.
Well, I guess Frank, let me ask you this, and it alludes to we don't want to lose the spaces, but when the original parking lot was designed, was the pad in the design? Correct me if I'm wrong and refresh my memory, or did it change because we didn't know where to put that darn generator?
Well, the generator, I can answer part of that. The generator was somehow mistakenly designed to go in the old building.
Okay.
Someone forgot at DTC that we were tearing down the old building. That's how we landed up. Well, just being honest, and that's the honest answer. It's not a criticism. And so we put it in a temporary spot where it is right now till we get it relocated to its permanent location.
So if we were to relocate it right now to where we all thought it was going, and now it's like, oops, we lose 5 parking spaces. If we put this retaining wall in, you're saying that's what's eliminating the 5 parking spaces? I guess I'm just.
Tom, I would have Tom address.
Can I comment on this a little bit? So the original generator location was located in a nook, sort of between the police station and the town hall. It turned out that there's a significant amount of conduit that runs under that location, including the fiber line. That's where it was supposed to go. It was determined through discussion that that is not where it should be. We didn't want that to sit over those conduits. So then we had limited options for where it could go. It was pushed a little further north to the location where the PD currently is. There is a retaining wall in the contract documents to protect that generator and to allow for the extra parking spaces in the northwest corner. We just saw the removal of that retaining wall in the 5 spots as an opportunity to gain some value engineering at this point to offset the surprise cost of the unsuitable soils we recently discovered. However, this is the first time we've had the opportunity to discuss it with the committee as a whole. So we're presenting that option. If the committee as a whole feels that that's not a smart decision, then certainly we wouldn't proceed or recommend that.
You all set, Anthony?
I'm a little just sorry, I was unmuted. So the modular retaining wall was in the documents, but never priced out. Like, how did we come up with?
The modular retaining wall is in the contract. It's owned by the project. The thought is if we remove 5 parking spaces, we can grade down. We don't have to put the retaining wall in, and we can credit out the retaining wall. So that would be a credit back to the project.
Okay. Oh, I thought from looking at this, it looked like it was an extra 20 grand to put the retaining wall in.
Yeah, Frank didn't put parentheses around it.
Okay.
It was budgeted for.
And if we keep it the way it's planned, budgeted, and put the retaining wall in, you're saying we lose the 5 spaces, or we gain or we keep it as is? I'm trying
we keep everything as is. We just can't pursue a $20,000 credit.
It's an opportunity to save money.
Can I hang on a second? I need to clarify this, and maybe it'll answer Anthony Claffey's question about the wall and the cost. So the 20,000, whatever it is, roughly 20,000, this was initially a CM contingency item. So yes, it was part of the contract documents. There was a carved out spec section to deal with the modular retaining wall that unfortunately never got allocated to anybody's scope of work. So yes, it's part of the contract. It's an unbought scope of work and therefore part of the CM contingency. So we thought that we could live without the wall, pump up the CM contingency, return funds to the CM contingency, therefore covering the total cost of the polluted soil and backfill.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Tom, also for clarifying.
Okay, you all set, Anthony?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions on these items?
Deputy Mayor and then Commissioner Minor.
Yeah, please.
No, I think that's from earlier.
Okay, Mr. Minor.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I mean, just a little bit of clarification is we've got 2 we had one known environmental concern when we started this whole thing, and that was ACM material carried within the old abandoned gym. The fuel contaminated soil that we came across during the phase one portion of digging for the new building was identified. We got out of it, and we're able to continue on without a whole lot of damage being done. The issue was they only could excavate as far as they could physically get because the other building was there, 20 feet away. Now that the other building has been removed and they physically removed the concrete, as soon as that occurred, it was almost instantly identified of additional fuel contained material just by the odor of it. I had people had asked me, why does it smell so bad of diesel? And it was because of that material. It had been naturally encapsulated and trapped underneath the old foundation of the old building. And now we're married to dealing with it now. I don't want to sacrifice items within the budget. This is clearly not anything that would have been identified short of doing, phase 3 borings within the existing town hall slab, which nobody would have ever thought of doing that before. So what I don't want to do is short some of the items that were expected, i.e. additional parking. I respect and understand Frank's attempt to try to carve out something that was not carved out before, but I don't want to short it from any more of the value of what we have already gotten to at this point. If we're short and need additional funds, then we're short and need additional funds. We need to address those now, because if we have an estimated quantity now of fuel contaminated material plus what we've already removed, Frank, just off the top of my head, I'm saying 3, 4, 5, maybe 500,000. Is that a correct assumption, estimate?
What's the 500,000 figure?
I don't know what
Total fuel contaminated soil that was unknown before we started this.
It's
All of
the pocket we're dealing with now is about 800 yards.
It's $127,000 problem.
So for this section here, it's 127,000 plus the other ones that we found.
Yeah.
And again, these were abandoned fuel tanks owned by the town of Newington that just left them and walked. And we're stuck dealing with the consequences of it. And that's where I'm getting upset, is if we're short on money, we need to go ahead and find additional resources to complete this properly and not short it on the backside. That's all I'm saying.
I think this is a good exercise, though, and we want Frank to do this. We want him to bring us in the design team cost-saving opportunities so we can have these kind of discussions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't necessarily see them. So they've been very good about showing a cost, but then trying to show an opportunity to cover that cost for the project through a suggestion of some adjustment. And we don't have to go along with them, but I think it's important that Frank be encouraged to continue to provide opportunities for us, as well as the design team, on saving money.
Right. So we have an estimate in play. Are we going to be able to cover this estimated fuel contaminated soil removal without carving out?
Yeah,
items?
That's going to be covered.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
We've already taken care of half of it with the CM contingency.
So can I just ask?
Let me hold on one second, Anthony. I just want to make sure I'm tracking individuals who have their hands up, because I'm only seeing a few pictures. James, can you help me out with that?
You're fine. Commissioner Claffey is next.
Okay, Anthony, go ahead, please.
I kind of agree with council member Minor, and I agree, like, you can't bore in the middle of an office while we're trying to work. So I agree that there's some undetected areas. And if Joe, if I'm hearing what you're saying, is that kind of unfortunate more fuel problem is taken care of on the town side, outside of really the scope of this project, this $28 million project. Is it safe to say tonight to Chris Minor's point of saving the parking spaces, that we can save the parking spaces without spending any more money, because we need as much parking as we can.
Well, I mean, if you want to disassociate the savings to the, you know, what's important to the project, then absolutely. I mean, you can't have both.
But what I'm getting at tonight is, as a committee, are we saying as a committee to the town, hey, this building was put here, we weren't aware of X, meaning the fuel, but we had done the best we could with the 28 million to figure out what was on the demo side of the building. You know, is that something, I don't know, maybe Mr. Minor needs to, you know, am I kind of on the same page, or is the committee all on different, the committee members all seeing this differently?
No, I think the committee's focused as it has been historically, and I think Mr. Chapman is aware of that. I've conveyed those comments to him as recently as Monday. So he's clearly aware of our predicament and the fact that we worked hard to stay within the budget.
So is it fair to Councilor Minor's point that we can save the parking spaces with
Well,
what
that's a
we've already
decision the
done?
committee has to make. That has to be presented to us on a vote type situation. and we make a decision.
I thought that money was in the budget. That's what I was trying to understand between Frank and Tom. I thought the
money is in the budget, but this was an attempt to try to save some money by the suggestions that Mr. Arcari was putting out there, that we don't have to follow them. They were just suggestions.
So we're gonna save the parking spaces and have the retaining wall and the pad locations the same.
Frank, I'd have to ask you to confirm that.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's clear that we want to fulfill the original charge of this project, and that is to ensure we have all the parking spaces that, you know, we originally signed up for. So what does that mean at the end of the day? We put the retaining wall back into the equation, but we still have to find 20 grand somewhere else.
That's my point here, is that technically we're still out, even if we save, we're out another 20 grand. Because we tried to save it somewhere else, or we already did, and then didn't look at the end game. I want to make sure all the committee members know that.
It's a matter of choice. Some committee members would say give up the spots for the savings and others wouldn't. But that's not going to change the process of what we've been going through for the last 18 months.
No, I know it's not, Joe. I know it's not going to change it. What I'm getting at is clarify with the committee members that 5 minutes ago, I thought the 20 grand was included and it was already in part of the 28 million. And now I just realized with Frank that 20,000 is, no, it's extra. We still have to pay it. That's why I was confused.
It is, well, to try to clarify this again, it is part of the original GMP value, right? The 27,760,989. So it's coming out of, the way we would fund it would come out of contingency, CM contingency, that's already built into the GMP.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this was an opportunity to suggest to the committee an alternative approach to save money, to shift it to another expense within the
Now,
budget.
Chris O'Neill brought up a good suggestion, and that is to look at the other side, the other retaining wall that's supposed to go in, where we demoed, if you guys remember, the old parking lot outside the old facilities garage. There was an old retaining wall there, and you step down to that parking lot coming off the sidewalk from Garfield. We're supposed to put another retaining wall back over there, I believe, and Chris and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, that one could go away, and that one we could regrade and not sacrifice any parking spaces. Is that correct? Is Tom or Chris still there?
Yeah, I believe so.
I'm here. Yeah. We'll have to take a look at it, I think.
Okay. And again, these numbers, everybody just keep in mind, the numbers are rough orders of magnitude. And when we typically prepare these, we are conservative. So in the case of the soil, we haven't hauled any of that material out. We are conservative with the estimate. So, we could pick up, a couple grand here and there. And then if we can eliminate this other retaining wall, then we just solved our $20,000 problem.
As a note to everybody, Joe got kicked from the meeting, so I'm waiting for him to come back in.
That's classic.
I think he was just done.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
He's not on. Who's vice chair? Do we have one?
No, no vice chair.
Okay.
James, you could be vice chair.
No, thank you.
The control panel over here. Who's talking?
I know Joe likes to keep track of questions and answers, so. There he comes. Welcome back, Mr. Chairman. You're muted still.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
I'm sorry, my computer died. All right, where were we, gentlemen? Where were we?
Mr. Murtha, I believe, has a question.
Okay, Mr. Murtha.
Frank, not to beat a dead horse or nothing, but what's the cost of 40 truckloads of structural fill?
I'm not holding you to this number.
No, but I know where he's going. I know where Ed is going with this. It's roughly 1,300, something like that.
That's all?
Yep.
So Ed, where are you going with this?
No, I just
Not going to
wanted to know
allow,
my
not
own
gonna
information.
allow for conversations between members. If you have a question, address it to the chair, please.
So Joe,
Yeah, yeah.
I do have a question. I just want to, I'm pretty sure I understand this $20,000 figure. So if no other solution comes and the 20,000 wall has to be built, all that means is we're going to take we have to find $20,000 to cover the cost of the pollution removal, correct?
Thank you, Don. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Now, as
Mr.
far
Chair?
as having conversations with Mr. Chapman, I have to say that Mr. Chapman extended himself the other day. You all know it because you got a copy of the letter. He's going to backfill a project up to $150,000. He didn't tell me where to spend it. He didn't make any recommendations where to spend it. He just said there are important items that you guys have got to do yet. So there is that. Are there anybody else have a comment?
Next would be Deputy Mayor Bedrejko, then Commissioner Woods. Actually, are you all set?
I'm all set.
Okay, I'll pull your hand down.
Gail?
Yeah, I'm going to be in the minority on this, I know. But personally, I think COVID has shown us that working from home is going to be an alternative I don't think it's just going to be a short-term alternative. I think people are going to realize that it's an option, and it's going to be continued beyond COVID. So in my opinion, the loss of 5 parking spaces on a daily basis not going to be devastating to the community or to the functional operation of the town hall. Will it impact, when we have, big community center events? Perhaps, yes, but it's 5 spaces. But I don't think we should plan for the exception. We should plan for the daily basis. So I would not be, I would not be championing, the fact that we've got to, if it makes sense for the project, I don't think the loss of 5 spaces on a daily basis is going to negatively impact the functioning of the community center. That's my opinion. Because I think working from home is going to be the norm within the next several years.
Okay, thank you, Gail. Mr. Minor?
Thank you. Appreciate it, Joe. 2 things. One, are any of the calculations we're using including or excluding the backstop money? Is that being accounted for, or are we just going 0 and now going negative to account for that?
That we haven't gotten into yet.
Okay.
The committee will do, I would recommend the committee evaluate these day 2 items and other things, and then we'll submit that to the town manager. And he'll forward advance money to the account.
Okay, and the second point is, and we were just touching on it when we lost you, is the opportunity potentially of the loss of retaining walls on the Garfield Street side. Now,
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I couldn't.
I said the one thing we were touching on before we lost you was the potential removal of the retaining walls on the Garfield Street side.
Okay.
And I think, in my opinion, that would be more beneficial to look at if there would be no loss in parking, because we're sloped on the entire Garfield Street side of the new building. If we could continue the same sloping on that, that might be another alternative to potentially removing the modular up on the other end. Now, Chris O'Neill, it was the wall proposal on the Garfield Street side for a pour in place, or was it modular as well?
Chris?
It's a concrete wall, Chris.
So pour in place?
Yes, it's not modular.
Okay. All right. So that might be an avenue to look at to see if we could just maybe get rid of that.
I agree.
Okay, any other comments?
Those are all my hand raised at the moment.
Okay. The parking issue for the town hall is much larger than 5 spaces. We all know that. We've had discussions, the council's had discussions, this one and others, about how we really get to a realistic situation to accommodate, especially the Parks and Rec potential traffic or any other traffic for events. It's inadequate, really, in general, given the potential of number of vehicles that may come in. We all know that. And so the 5 spaces are important, but they're not going to resolve the issue of parking. That's a much bigger issue that we're all aware of. And at some point has to be focused on, not by this committee certainly, but at least in collaboration with this committee as we grow that area. And as we look at other projects that Parks and Rec is anticipating undertaking, we certainly have to look at it in earnest. It's not just 5 spots. That's for sure. Okay. I'm sorry that? What was that? I'm sorry.
I think that was just some feedback, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Okay, Frank, do you want to show some pictures?
I'm ready to fire up my snow blower. I don't know about you guys.
I got to send out the fire department to get you home or what?
No, I don't see anything yet. I think we're good.
Okay. All right. We'll go with your forecast.
Yeah, yeah. We can dive into some photos. I don't have a lot. I don't have any glamour shots anymore, unfortunately, to share with you all. Just some boring site photos. The first one is just the utility run That's to get the power feeds to the new generator location. So that's coming from the main switchgear room along the north side of the town hall, getting to the new generator spot closer to the PD. So that was, I think I mentioned the trench before. It was inspected today, was approved, and the site guys were all over that, backfilling that trench this afternoon. Next photo. That's a snapshot of the crew working on the footing along the south side of the PD. That was work happening today. They're prepping for a concrete placement there that will accommodate the new stairway that's going to run along that south side. And next photo. So that kind of gives you a sense of the amount of material that was removed that was deemed fuel contaminated soil by Enviromed. And we were directed by Enviromed to extract all of that soil and to just give you an idea of how, that's roughly 17 feet down, 17-foot deep hole that we hogged out all that material. And it's currently stockpiled, and I believe the next photo shows the stockpile. James, can we get to the next photo? So you can see the pile currently protected with plastic. Again, about 800 yards or 1,200 tons of material that is slated for Chicopee, Massachusetts. So we're working through the paperwork right now, gathering the manifests that will need the town sign off. There'll be a little bit of a review period. If all goes well, we would like to start hauling this material next week. I know we're going into, hard to believe, Christmas is next week. We might have an opportunity to get in here before the holiday to start hauling this material. I believe that was it, right, James?
Yes, just the 4.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, consider to take any other business pertinent to the committee? Public participation.
Joe, I think you're on in 2 places.
Yeah, hold on.
So from not being here at all to being here twice.
Oh, you cloned yourself. Pretty good.
Tell you, I'm like a bad penny. I keep showing up. Okay. Any other business pertinent to the committee? Public participation.
Nobody with us, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Comment by committee members. Any comments? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I just want to read the memo that Mr. Chapman wrote on our behalf to the finance director. And it appears that we are reaching the end of work on the town hall project with all contingency funding being exhausted due to unanticipated environmental cleanup under the old town hall. These costs are unavoidable, and therefore please set aside $150,000 for reserve. Costs arise. We do not know there will be additional costs for several items, but that must be accomplished. We do know that there will be additional costs for several items and must be accomplished and set aside. Will be partially expended over the next several months. Signed, Keith Chapman. Okay, I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. God bless and stay healthy. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any discussion?
Oh, happy holidays, everybody.
Okay, God bless and take care. Stay healthy.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Yeah, bye now.